And we'd like to extend a warm welcome to you today. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started at exactly 4 p.m., giving everyone a moment to get in on time. Once again, thank you for joining us today. We'll be starting at exactly 4 p.m. And it is 4 p.m. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Althea Rowe. Thank you today for joining us for this 30-minute webinar in our Research to Policy Critical Conversations in Language Education series. This year's theme is Let's Be Real About Literacy Development for Multilingual Learners. We will focus on addressing the real-world challenges and opportunities in supporting literacy development for multilingual learners. Through dynamic discussions with leading voices in the field, we will explore innovative strategies, research-centered approaches, and practical policy insights to enhance literacy outcomes for diverse multilingual learners. Today's webinar is Comprehensive Literacy Approach for Multilingual Learners, and we will be speaking with Martha Hernandez. I'm joined today by Zip Nguyen and Marguerite Lukes. We will post a recording of this webinar on our website after the event. Before we begin, please mute your microphone to avoid interruptions. You can activate closed captioning by pressing the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. This event is provided as a public service. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed belong solely to the guest speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of our organization. Our panel comprises esteemed experts who work at the intersection of research, policy, and practice in language education, language access, and equity. You can learn more about them on the webinar's webpage. We will share that link in the chat. We do encourage you to ask questions via the Q&A box throughout the webinar. We will answer as many as possible at the end of our discussion. This is an excellent opportunity to tap into the wealth of knowledge we are fortunate to have here today. Also, click the chat button at the bottom of the screen to share your thoughts and comments anytime. Try it out right now by letting us know where you're listening from today. I will now pass the microphone to our facilitators.
Thank you, Althea. Welcome, Dr. Hernandez. I just want to start the webinar by asking a very general question about the comprehensive approach to literacy development for multilingual learners. Could you tell us what does that framework or approach look like for multilingual learners, and what examples are you hearing from teachers who implement these?
Thank you, Zip. And it's wonderful to be here. A comprehensive approach to literacy development for multilingual learners is one first that is grounded in solid research on English learners, bilingual development, and second language acquisition. It recognizes that reading is not just about one component. And I want to say yes to foundational skills, and yes, phonics and decoding are essential, but they're only part of the picture, only one piece of a much larger puzzle. And so we are talking about integrating all four domains of language, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, because literacy is deeply connected to language overall. And we know that it's through language that students learn content, express ideas, interact with others, and make sense of the world, both academically and socially. And and when I say we, I'm referring to the National Committee for Effective Literacy. We often refer to Dr. Lori Olson's work. in a brief titled Comprehensive Effective Literacy for English Language Learners, which lays out the essential interconnected components that need to be working together to form a comprehensive approach to literacy. So, in addition to the foundational skills of phonemic awareness, letter knowledge, and alphabet, phonics and decoding, concepts of print and fluency, we also have oral language development, vocabulary across the content areas, building that background knowledge, comprehension and meaning making, writing, print immersion, and access and active engagement with text, with books, and also cross language connections and very important English language development, or how English works for English learners. These components aren't taught in a sequence, they happen simultaneously so that students are learning how to read and write while also building language and content knowledge. And for our youngest learners, our dual language learners, especially ages 3 to 5, this means doubling down on developing oral language and vocabulary in both English and the home language, along with print awareness, phonological awareness, and again, a love of books. These are the building blocks for everything that comes later. And so a comprehensive literacy approach isn't a menu you pick from, it's a system. And so when one part is missing or delayed, it disrupts a student's overall growth and learning. I do want to spotlight that the National Committee for Effective Literacy recently released a report with a very long title. The title is Voices from the Field: Impact of the Implementation of the Science of Reading Instruction and Policy on Emergent Bilingual English Learner Literacy Programs and Teachers, written by Kathy Escamilla and Kim Strong from the University of Colorado at Boulder, which captures what some teachers are experiencing under current science of reading initiatives. And so one teacher, put it clearly. She stated that I'm expected to double down on foundational skills, but my students are craving opportunities to express themselves, to talk about the science or social studies content that they're learning. And so, the most effective classrooms are really integrating language, literacy with content. So teachers are using science and social studies content to build vocabulary and comprehension and to spark academic discussion. They're creating space for students to use their full linguistic repertoires, treating their home languages as assets and not obstacles or barriers. And so literacy for multilingual learners isn't just about sounding out words, it's about making sense of the world through language.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hernandez, for weaving all these integrated components together for us. This is so helpful. And for mentioning the report. I have a question about misconceptions. What are the main misconceptions about literacy development for multilingual learners? And where do you find that there is the most confusion?
So, I do want to kind of highlight, I guess the comparison of a comprehensive approach to a narrow approach, because I think that's where a lot of the misconceptions lay. And so when we are talking about narrow approaches, those often prioritize one component. And most often this component are foundational skills like phonics and decoding. And again, these skills are important, but when they crowd out other aspects of literacy instruction, oral language, writing, comprehension, content learning, and ELD, we are really doing a disservice to multilingual learners. And so, again, a comprehensive approach connects all these elements. It builds foundational skills while developing language, meaning, and expression. It's integrated, coherent, and sustained over time. And, as documented in our report, we're seeing a hyper focus in some places. There's a belief that if we just load up on phonics, everything else will fall into place. But multilingual learners need that simultaneous access to language-rich, meaningful instruction. And so, when we're talking really about, about misconceptions, I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is thinking that multilingual learners should follow the same path as monolingual English speakers. And that often leads to the assumption that phonics programs created for English proficient students or even translated versions will be enough, but that's simply not the case. For multilingual learners, literacy development happens across two or more languages, and that changes the game. The home language, again, isn't a barrier, it's a resource. And so when we activate and build on that language, we're actually strengthening their literacy in English too. So making cross-language connections and understanding how skills transfer between languages isn't just helpful, it's key, it's essential. Also, this means literacy for multilingual learners needs its own intentional design. Our multilingual learners, their brains work bilingually, and we need to honor that by integrating second language pedagogy that supports both their language and development and their identity. Another area of confusion is the idea that students must master foundational skills before being exposed to rich content or engaging text. And so, for multilingual learners, that kind of sequential approach can be very limiting. These students are learning to decode and acquire a new language at the same time. So they need access to meaningful, complex language and content really from the start, not just an extended focus on isolated phonics. And another, I guess, misconception or confusion is just maybe the over reliance on an English assessment that may not tell the full story. So if a student scores low on an English screener, they're often placed into some type of intervention, and it's usually more phonics. And so, without considering what they already know and can do in their home language, we may be making misplacements for these students. Many of these students, might already decode, but just not in English. And what they need isn't more of the same, but intentional bridges between languages, opportunities for oral language development, and an instruction that makes space for their full linguistic identity, so to speak. And I think another confusion or misinterpretation is that oral language may not be a priority, but it's foundational, for building vocabulary and grammar, comprehension, and confidence. So when we take away English language development or English as a second language time to add another block of phonics, we really risk losing the very supports that help multilingual learners learn and thrive. And the report, Voices from the Field, really highlighted this. Teachers shared concerns that current literacy policies are crowding out the kinds of learning environments that multilingual learners need, places that honor their home language, encourage dialogue, and, build content knowledge across languages. So, at the end of the day, we need to shift from an either or thinking to a yes and approach. Yes to foundational skills, and yes to language development and oral language and cross linguistic connections. And that's how we create literacy that's rigorous and inclusive and affirming of our students' full potential.
Thank you. Martha, you probably have alluded to this partnership or the partnership between ELD, ESL development, and literacy development. But could you give us a little bit more of your thoughts on how they are partners and how a design that is intentional about this partnership between ESL, ELD, and literacy development may benefit multilingual learners?
So yes, ELD and ESL are essential partners to literacy development because through ELD and ESL, students gain the academic language, the vocabulary, the discourse structures that they need to comprehend and produce text across content areas. So they also in ELD and ESL engage in oral language development. And this is making sense of what they read, participating in academic conversations, and expressing their thinking. This kind of language work builds the bridge between decoding and meaning making. As one teacher told us, my kids can sound out the words, but they don't know what they're reading. And ELD gives me the space to help them connect it all. So ELD does provide a space where language is made visible and accessible. It's where teachers scaffold text and lift up and elevate student voice. Without designated ELD and ESL that provides focus on how English works and practice for second language learners, most aspects of learning to read in English become very challenging. It is a struggle to hear and isolate the sounds and phonemes of English, a challenge really to understand the syntax and the structure of English text, and difficult to comprehend and make meaning of vocabulary in a language they haven't learned. So designated ESL ELD should prepare for and respond to the linguistic demands that English learners are facing in their other core content areas throughout the curriculum. And so, in the report, it was a middle school teacher that remarked that my students can decode just fine, but they just don't understand what they're reading. And that's where ELD comes in. And so in classrooms where ESL ELD is working well, you see students having structured conversations around text. You see students using sentence frames or sentence starters and models to write analytically. You see students drawing on their home language to build vocabulary bridges to the new language, English. And you see students being encouraged to share their own experiences as a source of meaning making. And so, in these ways, ELD is a critical partner to literacy for English learners.
Thank you so much, Martha. Now, several people have asked about the Voices from the Field report, so I want to speak to that. What else are teachers currently saying about their challenges with multilingual learners and literacy development? What are you hearing from the field?
And so what we are hearing is that there's a misalignment between policies and the needs of multilingual learners. We know, that policies and instructional mandates, especially those influenced by the science of reading, often focus on monolingual English speakers and neglect the linguistic and cultural assets of multilingual learners. And so the challenge for teachers is that they feel pressured to follow rigid models that don't allow space for translanguaging or home language use or oral language development, which of course are critical to multilingual learner literacy. Also, teachers' challenges, of course, is inadequate curriculum and materials. Most curriculum materials are designed for native English speakers, and rarely include scaffolds and culturally relevant text or dual language supports. And that requires teachers, it's a challenge for teachers that they must modify or supplement materials constantly to meet the diverse language needs of their students. And of course, they're needing to do this without enough time or resources to do so. And so teachers are really, really hungry for materials that really weave in, intricately um, English language arts, English language development in ESL, as well as, when applicable, Spanish language arts, where it's all integrated. Also, we heard about limited professional development. And so many educators report that they don't receive sufficient training, on how second language acquisition intersects with literacy development. And so, the general literacy professional development that the teachers are receiving often excludes strategies for scaffolding languages, for using students' home language and languages, or even developing biliteracy pathways, right? Because literacy looks different when you're pursuing a biliteracy pathway. And so teachers are left unprepared to meet their students, full linguistic and academic potential. Also, time constraints and competing priorities again. Teachers are expected to cover more content than ever, and we know that multilingual learners require intentional, sustained language development, which takes time. So the teachers reported that it was, difficult to balance, foundational skills, vocabulary, oral language, reading comprehension, and content instruction within limited instructional time. And that was a constant struggle. And then just, many, we talked about accountability systems, based on standardized testing, kind of pushing teachers to teach to the test in English. And that may not accurately measure, multilingual learners' content knowledge or literacy development. So for teachers, this discourages bilingual approaches or the use of the home language, even when those practices, have been shown, right, by research to strengthen long-term literacy outcomes. In terms of the report, we did have some key findings, and I do want to mention that the teachers, reported understanding the importance of foundational skills, including phonics, and appreciated having more direction and materials to teach them effectively. But again, the amount of time they were required to dedicate to these skills has become problematic. And then, as I mentioned, the mandates to prioritize English foundational skills significantly reduced the time available for ELD. And so that was a big challenge again for teachers. And then there was, in terms of the dual language immersion teachers that were interviewed for the report, um, they said that because robust literacy programs have been narrowed to focus almost exclusively on foundational skills, and in many cases, English foundational skills, that this compromised the implementation and sustainability of dual language programs. And these are programs that have program models that are 90-10, 80-20, 50-50. The instructional minutes dedicated to each of the languages is becoming a problem, trying to make room for this extended focus on foundational skills, and the crowding out of the curriculum, of other curriculum, and literacy elements. And so the shift really has reduced access to a comprehensive and full curriculum for all students, and teachers are feeling a lack of teacher agency. It's negatively impacted teachers' professional practices. And, we did have findings that some literacy programs lack culturally inclusive and relevant content, further limiting their effectiveness. And so I guess all in all, there's a clear call for culturally and linguistically responsive instruction, integrated and designated ELD time, a protected time for designated ELD, and of course, the implementation of integrated ELD into all of the content areas. And there's a call for more professional development that centers on the needs of multilingual learners and the need for more flexible assets-based policies that empower teachers to meet the needs of their students. And so we heard of course we have many quotes from the report, and you know you know, they're being asked to follow a script, that doesn't work for their English learners. They need more language, more context, not just sounds. And so, neglect of the home language, etc. So, and just again, I think loud and clear that professional expertise of teachers is being sidelined. Veteran bilingual and ELD and ESL teachers feel their expertise is being devalued, and the mandates often conflict with what they know from years of successfully teaching multilingual learners. And so these challenges again highlight the need for literacy policies and practices that are responsive to the diverse needs of multilingual learners, and ensuring that instruction is both comprehensive and culturally sustaining.
Thank you. Martha, we have about a few minutes left and we have a few questions in the chat. I'm going to take my privilege as a facilitator to ask the questions that go with the title of the series, which is Let's Be Real.
Yes.
About literacy development for multilingual learners, and privilege questions that had to do with practice a little bit, with your permission. One of the questions has to do with how do we approach foundational skills, literacy and content for secondary students who are SLIFE?
I think that, and that is a very good question. And so, I think that there needs to be, and I know there's not a lot of time, but coordination between the content teachers and, the ELD teachers. But I think we need to ensure that there's plenty of oral language, that classrooms are intentionally talk rich environments with time for student to student interaction, academic discussions, and collaborative meaning making. And opportunities, for example, for students to do structured partner retells and say it again routines, where they practice using key academic vocabulary in complete sentences before they write. I know that, the sequential model, like phonics first and comprehension later, that really, there could be some time of the period with newcomers or SLIFE students where there's an explicit lesson on foundational skills, but then there's opportunities, right, to whether it's a shared reading of a culturally relevant text where students discuss characters and use sentence frames to talk about the text, and then write or draw responses. I know that we are encouraging, especially for our immigrant and refugee students, to engage in text where they personally connect, reading text, whether it's done orally, where they can personally connect with what they're going through, whether they're being separated from their families, whether, one of their family members has recently been deported or whatever, and using these culturally relevant topics to help students, transition into English. They have knowledge. They have knowledge in their home languages, and we have to capitalize on that. The home language has to be visible, heard, and activated in classroom routines. Whether there's bilingual anchor charts that list science vocabulary in both languages, students doing concept mapping in their home language before discussing ideas in English, etc. And of course, there's, helping students notice similarities and differences between their languages to develop transferable literacy skills and kind of meta-linguistic understanding. So there's a lot that we could share.
Thank you. I think, unfortunately, we're running out of time. Althea is here to close us out. So thank you so much, Martha, for being with us.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you for inviting me to the conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope this was enlightening for you. We have reached the end of our webinar. A big thank you to our speaker and our facilitators for their time here today. Please, audience, check your emails for a recording of this webinar. Also, please stay tuned for an announcement of the next webinar in this year's series. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.